Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel and thanks for stopping by. If you're new here, welcome. My name is Stephanie. I know it's been a little bit since I've posted, but I'm back today with 11 brand new adorable honeybee themed DIYs that's going to be perfect for your springtime tiered tray. Let's go ahead and jump right into DIY number 1. For this quick and easy DIY, I used 1 pack of these wooden honey dippers and 4 of these honeybee buttons that I picked up for 40% off at Hobby Lobby, and a couple of gold glitter glue sticks from Dollar Tree, as well as a piece of wax paper. I decided to try out the hot glue gun from Dollar Tree for this one because I didn't really want to put the glitter glue sticks in my main glue gun, and it worked surprisingly well for $1.25. All I did was put the glue on each of the honey dippers to look like honey. For a couple of them, I put the glue on in a way that it looked like it had been used and the honey was dripping down the side, and set it aside to dry. Then for a couple of the others, I put a generous amount of glue directly onto the wax paper and placed the dipper down into the glue and added some more glue directly on top so that it looked like the honey was dripping off and pulling around the top of the dipper. Next, I took one of the bee buttons and placed it down on the hot glue while it was still hot and set it aside for the glue to harden. And that's it for this one, y'all. Super quick and easy. Here's how all 6 of the honey dippers turned out. I did end up doing each one a little bit differently, and I did leave one plain. I'm in love with how these turned out, and you'll see a little bit later on how I used one of these in another DIY. To display a few of these dippers on my tiered tray, I put them in this little glass jar that I picked up at Hobby Lobby that I thought kind of looks like a honey pot. Let's move on to DIY number 2. For this second quick and easy DIY, I used one of the wooden home signs from Dollar Tree. I started by painting the entire base of the sign with 1 coat of folk art chalk paint in the color Rich Black. Once the base was dry, I used apple barrel paint in the color King's Gold to paint the front and back of the word home. Next, I took one of the white metallic markers from Dollar Tree and added stitching to the letters. I tried to get the stitching as close to the center of each of the letters as possible. I did end up doing this on the front and back of each of the letters. To finish up this DIY, I used one of these super cute bee stickers that I picked up at Hobby Lobby in their scrapbooking section and placed it over the O in the word home. I did not end up having to use any additional glue or adhesive because the adhesive on the back of the sticker was strong enough to hold it to the sign. Here it is all finished. I think it turned out super cute. Moving right along to DIY number 3. For this DIY, I used one of the small clay flower pots that come in a 3-pack from Dollar Tree and some stickers that I had in my stash. I used the stickers to spell out the word honey on the front of the pot. If you have a vinyl cutting machine, you could also cut the words out of vinyl, and it would probably be a little bit easier to get the letters straight. You can see that I did have to struggle with them a little bit and had to keep repositioning them until I got it close enough. You could also freehand the letters or use carbon paper to transfer them onto the pot and paint them if you'd like to. Next, I used some Dollar Tree twine that I pick up in their automotive section in a 3-pack and made a simple shoestring bow. Once I was happy with how the bow looked, I used hot glue to attach it to the flower pot right under the rim, right close to the middle of the word honey. Then I trimmed up the tails. Since I prefer the rustic look of the twine once all the fuzzies has been burned off, I took my candle lighter and very carefully burned them off of the bow. You don't have to do this is a personal preference. Once I had the bow hot glued into place, I took some yellow puffy paint from Walmart and went around the top of the flower pot, making it look like honey was spilling over the edge. I then set it aside to dry overnight. I really do love working with this puffy paint, but it does take a little bit longer for it to completely dry versus traditional paint, but I do love the 3D look that it gives to my projects. While the paint was drying, I took another one of the flower pots and a scrap piece of cardboard. I traced the opening of the pot onto the cardboard and cut it out so that it would fit nicely onto the top of the flower pot. This is what's going to be the base for the cupcake topper. To create the icing for the cupcake, I used 1 tub of the lightweight spackleting from Dollar Tree and emptied it out into a paper bowl so that I could color it a nice springtime yellow. I added a little bit of apple barrel paint in the color lemon to the spackleting to get the yellow color I wanted. I started out by adding a little bit of the paint and then added a little more as needed to achieve the desired color. I used one of the cake decorating kits from Dollar Tree with the largest star tip to pipe the spackling onto the base. Once I had the tip in place, I then spooned in the spackling. Fair warning, this part can get a little bit messy, but honestly, that's what makes this DIY so much fun. To keep the base from moving around while I was piping on the spackling, I used a small dab of hot glue on the bottom of the cardboard and stuck it to a piece of wax paper. After I had the base secured to the wax paper, I began piping the spackling around the edges and continued to pipe it until it looked like icing on a cupcake. Once I was happy with the height and shape of the cupcake topper, I went back and piped around the edge of the cardboard to fill in any gaps where it was still visible and set it aside to dry overnight. Once everything was completely dry, I used a generous amount of hot glue around the top of the flower pot to attach the top of the cupcake. I then used more of the yellow puffy paint to go around the edges of the cupcake topper to cover up any of the cardboard that was still visible. Once I had the cardboard covered up, I then used the puffy paint as a honey drizzle across the top of the cupcake to give it a little more dimension and a little more character. To finish off this DIY, I took one of the bee buttons from the first DIY and cut off the plastic loop on the bottom and then hot glued it to the top of the cupcake. I don't think it turned out half bad for my first time making a fake cupcake. I think it's absolutely adorable and it was easy to do, and the worst part was just waiting for all the pieces to dry to be put together. Don't blink because you'll miss the next DIY. For this quick and easy DIY, I used a yellow truck that I picked up at Walmart and another one of the bee buttons. I cut the plastic loop off the back of the bee and hot glued it to the hood of the truck. And that's all I did for this one. And we're quickly moving on to DIY number 5. For this DIY, I used another one of the small clay flower pots from Dollar Tree and some jute twine that I picked up at Walmart. I started by turning the flower pot upside down and creating a loop with the twine and hot gluing it to the bottom of the pot. Once I had the twine loop in place, I started at the base of the flower pot, wrapping it with the twine using hot glue to hold it in place, and continued wrapping it until I got to what is now the top of the Bee Skep or beehive. Once I got to the top, I went ahead and continued to wrap the twine around the top of the flower pot until it was no longer visible. I made sure while doing this to go around the base of the loop so that it looked like it was built into the top. And here's what the beehive looks like once it's been wrapped with twine. To create the entrance to the hive, I traced the top of a paint bottle using a permanent marker right above where the bottom starts to widen. I then used folk art paint in the color Rich Black and painted the inside of the circle I had traced. It did end up taking a couple of thick coats to fully cover the twine. Once the paint was completely dry, I took some more twine and hot glued it around the outside of the circle twice so that it would create a ledge. Next, I took some of the plain green floral moss from Dollar Tree and hot glued it randomly around the outside of the beehive to give it a little more depth and decor. After I had all the moss glued into place, I went ahead and trimmed it up so that it would be a little more neat. I then took another one of the bee buttons and cut the plastic loop off the bottom and hot glued it right above the entrance to the hive. For the finishing touch, I used some yellow puffy paint and put it on the bottom ledge of the hive entrance to make it look like the honey was overflowing from the inside, as well as to cover up the seam where the twine was overlapped. I'm super happy with the way this little bee skep or beehive turned out. It is so cute and looks amazing on my tiered tray. Moving on to DIY number 6. For this DIY, I used one of these wooden bee cutouts from Hobby Lobby. First, I used apple barrel paint in the color King's Gold to paint the 3 raised stripes on the bee. Next, I used folk art chalk paint in the color Rich Black and painted everything else except the wings. I also went ahead and painted the back of the bee as well as the sides. I did go ahead and paint 2 of the wooden tumbling tower blocks from Dollar Tree with the black chalk paint. To paint the wings on the bee, I used Waverly chalk paint in the color white. Once all the paint was completely dry, I used some stickers that I picked up at Hobby Lobby in their scrapbooking section to spell out the words "bee" and "happy" on the wings of the bee. To finish up this DIY, I hot glued the 2 tumbling tower blocks to the back of the bee so that it would stand up on its own. I absolutely love how this one turned out. It was so quick and simple, but I think it adds so much to my tiered tray. Now moving on to my favorite DIY. For this DIY, I used 5 of the plastic shower curtain rings from Dollar Tree and some of the thicker twine that I picked up at Walmart. I started by making sure the shower curtain ring was snapped closed and then wrapped it completely with the twine using hot glue to secure it in place. I then repeated this step on the remaining 4 rings. Next, I took 3 of the wooden tumbling tower blocks from Dollar Tree and painted them with folk art chalk paint in the color Rich Black. Once I had all the rings wrapped in twine, I laid them out on the table the way I wanted the honeycomb to look, with the openings facing downward. I decided to put 3 of the rings on the bottom, 2 in the middle, and 1 on the top. I then used a generous amount of hot glue to attach all the rings together. Here you're going to see that I only have the 3 on the bottom and 2 in the middle, but I do go back here in just a minute and add the top ring. Once I had all the rings glued together, I hot glued 1 tumbling tower block to each of the bottom rings so that the honeycomb would stand up. I made sure to stand it up after I hot glued each block so that I could push them flush with the bottom of the ring, because if not, the finished project will not stand up on its own. Next, I took some yellow puffy paint and put some on the bottom of each of the rings to make it look as if honey was dripping out of the honeycomb. I tried to do each ring a little differently so that it would look more natural, and I was okay if some of the paint dripped down a bit further than I had intended. I think that just gave it a more organic look. I was really loving the way the honeycomb was looking, but I thought it needed a little something something extra. So I took 2 of the bee buttons and cut off the plastic loop on the back and hot glued them onto 2 of the rings where I thought they looked good. Here's where I decided that I wanted to put a single ring up on the top of the honeycomb to make it look more balanced. So I hot glued 1 more ring onto the top of the center of the 2 middle rings. To finish off this project, I repeated the step with the yellow puffy paint to add the honey and then added another one of the bee buttons to the very top. I am so thrilled with how this DIY turned out. It is hands down my favorite DIY out of today's video. Let's jump on into DIY number 8. For this DIY, I used 9 of the wooden craft cubes from Dollar Tree. I painted 6 of the cubes completely with apple barrel paint in the color white. I then painted the remaining 3 cubes with apple barrel paint in the color King's Gold. Once the paint was dry on the cubes, I went back and lightly dry brushed the yellow cubes with some white paint and the white cubes with some King's Gold paint. Next, I took the same stickers from Hobby Lobby that I've been using throughout this whole video and used the lowercase side of the stickers to spell out the word hey on the 3 yellow blocks and the word honey on 5 of the white blocks. After I had the letters on the blocks, I went ahead and hot glued the words together. Once I had the words glued together, I then glued the word hey on top of the word honey, and then took the leftover white block and hot glued it to the top of the word hey. Next, I took one of the bee buttons and cut off the plastic loop and hot glued it to the front of the top white block. To finish off this DIY, I took some of the yellow puffy paint and put it on top of the blocks. I let it drip down on the front and the sides to make it look a little bit like the honey was dripping. And that's it for this one, y'all. It was really quick and simple to make, and it turned out super cute. Moving on to DIY number 9. For this DIY, I used one of these wooden house-shaped plaques from Dollar Tree and some yellow scrapbook paper that I picked up at Hobby Lobby. I started by painting the sides and the back of the plaque with a couple coats of apple barrel paint in the color white. After the paint was dry, I traced out the shape of the plaque onto the back of the scrapbook paper and cut it out. I then used an even layer of Mod Podge to attach the scrapbook paper to the front of the plaque. Once I had the paper on the front of the plaque, I used Mod Podge's professional decoupage tool to smooth out the paper and remove any of the lumps and bumps and set it aside for an hour or so to dry. You can use your fingers or a hard card of some kind to get the same results. I just used this tool because I had it on hand. Once it was completely dry, I went back and applied a generous even layer of Mod Podge to the top of the paper and again set it aside and let it completely dry. After the top layer of Mod Podge was good and dry, I took a sanding sponge from Dollar Tree and sanded around the edges of the plaque to remove any of the paper that was hanging over the edge so that it would have a nice finished look. To finish off this DIY, I took some twine from Dollar Tree and used a tiny dab of hot glue on the back of the house to hold it in place and wrapped it around the top of the house a few times, making sure to leave enough twine on either side so that I could tie a bow once I had the honey dipper in place. When I was happy with the look of the wrapped twine, I put one of the honey dippers from the first DIY laying diagonally on the left side of the house and used a couple tiny dabs of hot glue to hold it into place. I then took the 2 ends of the twine and tied a simple shoestring bow and used another tiny dab of hot glue to hold it exactly where I wanted it to sit on the honey dipper. I then trimmed up the tails to the bow, and that was it for this one. I'm really happy with the way this simple little house turned out. I think it's a perfect addition to my tiered tray. Now on to DIY number 10. For this DIY, I used one of the wooden birdhouses from Dollar Tree. I started by using folk art chalk paint in the color Rich Black to paint the roof, base, the little bird perch, and the inside of the opening. Once that was completely dry, I painted the rest of the birdhouse with a couple coats of apple barrel paint in the color King's Gold. Here's how the birdhouse looked once it was completely painted. Next, I took 2 more of the little bee stickers from Hobby Lobby and placed one right underneath the entrance to the birdhouse and the other one on the left side of the roof. To finish off this DIY, I used a white metallic marker from Dollar Tree and made little stitch-like marks behind each one of the little bees to give it a little something extra. And that's it for this super quick and easy birdhouse. I absolutely love how it turned out. Last but certainly not least, DIY 11. For this quick little arrangement, I found these adorable daisy picks in the party section at Hobby Lobby for just 99 cents. I also used a couple more of the little bee buttons and my wooden barrel from Hobby Lobby that I change out for each season. I took the two daisy picks and cut them apart and arranged the stems in the barrel the way I thought looked the best. I did try to keep them close enough together so that it looked like it was one single daisy plant and there wasn't a lot of empty space between the flowers. Once I was happy with the way the daisies looked, I took some of the green floral moss from Dollar Tree and placed it around the inside of the barrel so that you could no longer see the white styrofoam the flowers were pushed into. I then went ahead and fluffed up the daisies so that there wasn't any big gaps between the flowers. I took a couple of the bee buttons and cut off the plastic loop and hot glued them to the centers of two of the daisies to finish up this arrangement. This was more of a bonus DIY than an actual DIY, but I do love how it looks on my tiered tray. Here's the final reveal of all of today's DIYs displayed on my tiered tray. I absolutely love how these all turned out, and I hope you do too. Let me know which one is your favorite in the comments below, and if you have any suggestions on what type of tiered tray decor you would like to see in the future, leave that below as well. If you're looking for more honeybee DIYs, I have a couple more videos on my channel if you want to check those out. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day today to spend a little bit of time with me. And if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up because it really does help out my channel. Also, if you're already a subscriber, thank you so much. And if you haven't subscribed already, what are you waiting for? Click that subscribe button and stick around for a while. I have lots of fun projects on the way. I'll see y'all next time.